what should I buy first? So for somebody who's getting into hog hunting or coyote hunting for the first time and they want to know what equipment to get and what to prioritize, when people contact us initially, they're often asking, what should I get first? Should I get a PVS 14 or should I get a clip-on or should I get a handheld or a weapon scope? A lot of people gravitate towards a clip-on. If you haven't done a lot of night hunting,
Yeah.
it's like you already have a rig, you already have your rifle that you like, you have a scope that you like that you're used to, and so you want to just throw a clip on in front of it so you can use your existing setup. You don't have to have a separate night rig. You can take it on and off and have a day night rig essentially, and it looks cool. Like if you go on Instagram, that's what everybody likes to see. It looks cool if you have a clip on thermal or clip on night vision in front of your day optic.
It is.
It is cool.
It is.
It is cool.
I get.
But there are downsides. So we've talked about the pros of a clip-on. The cons, you're looking at extra weight on your rifle. So you're going to have your day optic plus a clip-on. In addition to that weight, you're going to have weight out in the front of your rifle. So the balance of your rifle is going to be off. The biggest limitation I'd say with thermal clip-ons is going to be your magnification. You're really not going to be able to use like that 3 to 18 scope or the 5 to 20 with most thermal clip-ons. Your magnification range is going to be limited unless you get into the real long range clip-ons, which cost a lot of money. You're
They
going to be looking at 15,000 plus usually for something that you can run up the magnification on. What else, Anthony?
It's something that I talk about the most, and it's point of impact shift. Yes, you're getting a good zero at 50, 100, 150 yards, but eventually, when you start going up in magnification on your LPVO, I usually don't go any higher than 3 power. I noticed that my accuracy is just not there at certain ranges.
Yeah, so you're going to get a point of impact shift with any clip-on, even like the best clip-ons, they're going to have some sort of range where there's a point of impact shift. So they'll say within 1 MOA or within 2 MOA is pretty typical, even for like a military clip-on. Hopefully, if it's a quality clip-on, that point of impact shift is going to be repeatable, so you can factor it into what you're doing, but you will most likely have a point of impact shift. The other issue is that with a lot of especially consumer clip-ons, you're going to have a collimation process. So they can kind of get those close at the factory, but a lot of times it's going to take some tweaking and adjustment to really get that thing collimated so you don't have a big shift. And with some clip-ons, you're going to have inconsistent shift from rig to rig. So
Oh yeah.
if you have a different day optic you line it up with and it's a little bit canted or off center or too high or too low, then that can potentially introduce a shift. There's just a lot of factors that make a clip-on a little more complicated than people think. Another reason why people often are drawn to clip-ons when they're first getting into it is because they think it's going to be cheaper. They think, well, I'm just adding it to my existing setup,
Yep.
so it must be cheaper. But no, the design of a clip-on is actually more complicated. It's actually going to be more expensive than just buying a dedicated thermal scope.
A lot of people don't realize that when you sight in some clip-ons, you have to sight in with your day optic magnification set, and you're really not supposed to increase or decrease that magnification on your day optic if you want to maintain accuracy. A lot of people don't realize that.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that can affect it. So a lot of the military clip-ons will have a fixed diopter, and that's to just minimize the variability in that point of impact shift because when you rotate that eyepiece lens, if you have a clip-on that has an adjustable diopter, then adjusting the diopter can affect your point of impact and adjusting the objective focus can too. There's a lot of things that you have to factor in. There are a lot of good uses for clip-ons, but for the typical person getting into like hog hunting or coyote hunting,
You get
I would say probably not the best fit for most people. Another issue is going to be your field of view. So a lot of times you're going to limit the field of view that you have. So basically, when you're using a clip-on, instead of using digital zoom on the thermal scope, you're going to be zooming in with that day optic. And so if you have a day optic that starts at a certain magnification, like it starts at 5 by, then you're going to be narrowing your field of view on that
it's gonna
clip on,
be tight. It's gonna be real tight.
which is going to also reduce your resolution and your image quality because you're just zooming in on those pixels. Your controls are harder to reach rather than just like reaching right there. You got to reach all the way to the front of your rifle to change some settings and adjust stuff. So that's an issue.
It's awkward, man. Reaching all the way up there and Trying to remember where the hell everything is.
The other option that a lot of people are thinking about is a PVS 14. A PVS 14 is a great optic to have, but if your purpose is hunting, then a PVS 14 is probably not going to be your best bet as far as utility for hunting. If you want something that's just an all around general purpose useful thing, the PVS 14 is great. They're lightweight, they're analog, the battery life is really good. So with the analog versus digital, you're not going to have any sort of latency like you would in a digital system. They're great for navigation. You can use it for driving, and you can see through glass with the PVS 14. One of the common misconceptions that we've gotten a lot, we used to fight about a lot on the forums, is the capabilities to ID stuff with night vision versus thermal. And I mean, maybe that was a little more of an argument back in the day
No,
when thermal resolutions weren't as high as they are now. But I would say you can ID at least as good, if not probably a lot better with a lot of thermals. A lot of that's going to come down to magnification too. A PVS 14 is a 1x night vision device versus, say, a 3x thermal. You're going to be able to ID most likely a lot better with that thermal.
I know that struggle.
Anthony, talk about your journey. You were a big night vision guy for a long time.
Yeah, I was. Before all that, I didn't have anything. I was just spotting with a clip on at that time. But Tyler tried to talk me into the whole helmet rig, and I was just like, man, this gonna look tactical, you know. But anyways, straight to it. I got PVS 14s. I was running two Vipers, and it was a blast, man. I was able to navigate. I was able to walk. I was able to follow everybody that was spotting and stalking. It made things a lot easier. But whenever the first MH25s dropped, I was like, oh, this is something else. So identifying definitely is a big issue with just night vision. Navigation's great. Doing your stalks, walking, knowing the terrain, seeing the terrain plays a big, big part with night vision. And Rich, you and Estienne run a PVS 14 and an RH25. Y'all run both, but I run dual thermals, and I'm telling you right now, it's been a game changer. I still like night vision though. I just don't play with it as much.
Night vision is cool. Night vision is cool. There's a lot of cool stuff you can do with it.
Yep,
Looking at the stars is crazy. Shooting with night vision and an IR laser is super fun.
a
It
lot.
gives you a lot of situational awareness. The biggest downside to night vision is going to be your ability to detect stuff. And that becomes clear very quickly when you're out hunting. You're going to miss probably north of 90% of the animals with a PVS 14 versus what you can catch with thermal. With thermal, it's obvious when there's an animal out there. You're going to see it if you sweep across while you're scanning. I mean, you're going to see animals miles out, depending on what unit you have. And that's the biggest thing. So in a hunting context, which is mainly what we're talking about, I mean, there are people who have different applications, law enforcement and tactical stuff, where a PVS 14 may be a better
Oh
choice
yeah.
for your first and only optic. But in the context of hunting, thermal is going to be way more advantageous than the night vision, especially a PVS 14. Night vision compared to, say, like a white light or a red light is a huge difference. But then once you get thermal, it's a game changer.
That's
It
huge.
becomes really obvious, and you wonder how you ever got along without thermal.
You will run out of animals.
Yeah, yeah, that'll be your biggest problem. Another one that I hear a lot of people who would call up and they'd say, I've been hunting coyotes for years with a red light or a white light. Their plan is usually to buy like a handheld monocular to supplement their existing rig, like a red light. They'll say, I'll detect the animals with the thermal monocular, and then when they come close, I'll shoot them with my red light. It's a little bit laughable to me. Like, can you do it? Yes. Is it ideal? Not at all. I got a buddy who's been using a red light just for kicks, just to try. And I think the last time we went out, every time he turned that light on, whatever he was trying to shoot immediately took off. And I know there's techniques like you point that light up in the air and slowly lower it down on the animal, but it's not ideal. So
You're gonna piss Chris off with that one.
you have some guys who have been doing stuff a long time. They're stubborn. I would say even Chris would admit the benefits of thermal over the lights. I mean, the lights, as far as getting quality footage, the way he does it is amazing. But is that the most efficient way to kill the most animals? Not at all. I guess we should get to what the recommendation is. So we've narrowed it down. My recommendation, what I tell people, if you just got money for one thing or you're just getting started and you want to know what's going to be the most useful thing, it's going to be a thermal weapon scope with a QD mount. A thermal weapon scope is going to be great because you can use it as a handheld. If you have a quality QD mount that returns to zero, you can take that on and off a rifle just as easy as you can a clip-on. You can do the same thing with your day optics. You can put a QD mount on your day optics and just swap it out for that thermal weapon scope. If you don't want to have a separate rig, you can get one that's relatively small and compact, and you're going to be able to kill stuff right away. You can throw it on a rifle and you can start shooting with it. So that would be my recommendation. Maybe we should take some questions from people, look through the chat and see what we have.
Is the ATN Thor any good? Seven question marks.
Are we getting punked by somebody we
I
know?
think I think we're getting trolled.
What is optical zoom?
Optical zoom is going to be as opposed to digital zoom. So up until recently, every thermal scope is going to have a fixed amount of optical magnification, and that's going to be based off your lens, focal length, your sensor resolution, and your pixel pitch. So optical zoom is basically the amount of magnification that you're going to have without losing any resolution, and that's usually based on those combination of factors. So all else being equal, the bigger lens, like say 50 millimeter versus 75 millimeter, the larger lens is going to have more optical magnification. You're going to have a longer detection and ID range the more magnification you have, but at the same time, you're going to have a narrower field of view. So depending on your application, you may want more or less optical magnification. Coyote hunters are going to want more optical magnification, and
Or by
yeah, 3 or 4x. And hog hunters, depending on your style of hunting, you may want, something lower like a 2x or a 3x or even a 1x, depending. If you hunt in a wooded area or pretty close quarters, you may want something with just 1x magnification and a really wide field of view to give you a little more situational awareness and be able to hit multiple targets on the run for hog hunting. But generally for coyote hunting, you're going to want a little more magnification to have some more accuracy and take some of those longer shots. Optical zoom in comparison to digital zoom, every scope is going to have a certain amount of digital zoom where you can enlarge the picture, but you're going to be cutting down your resolution as you zoom in. The first scope that had optical zoom was the iRay Rico Pro.
yep.
It's kind of like an LCAN. It's not like a infinitely variable zoom. It's just going to be like either switching from like a 1.5x to 3x, or I think a 2x to a 4x. I don't remember exactly off the top of my head. Those are interesting optics. We'll see if they have some extra utility for a wide scope of people. This is not for me, but it is nice that the technology is moving forward. I think the biggest issue with a scope that actually has optical like variable zoom is going to be that you're going to have to have a slower lens in most circumstances in order to get a high enough top end magnification to make it more useful.
What QD do you recommend for a thermal scope?
iRay uses a lot of ADM mounts, especially on the smaller units and the bolt style units. I want to say Envision uses ADM as well, don't they?
Yeah, American Defense mounts are the most common.
Yep.
I have them on tons of different optics and never had any issues with returning to zero. Those are super solid. So American Defense are great mounts. You don't have to worry about taking them on and off and losing your zero. Bobro mounts work good too. LaRue. I mean, there's a ton. There's less variation, I'd say, in the thermal market in terms of QD mounts, and even the factory mounts from iRay. On that iRay 1280 that I have, it's just a factory QD mount, and that thing has been rock solid.
iRay mounts are getting better.
They are getting better. Back in the day, the first thing you'd want to do is switch out that mount because one, they're butt ugly. They were huge, heavy, and not super reliable.
Right.
But they're getting a lot better. They're getting better looking. They're getting lighter, and the quality of the return to zero is much better these days.
Here's another good question. Bolt style mount or bolt style scope or a compact style scope
I prefer bolt style.
for your first
Yeah.
device. But if it's a bolt style scope, you can't take it off the weapon and use it as a handheld. So
There's a drawback to it, but it's great to have because a lot of these guys might not have semi-automatics or allowed to hunt with semi-automatics. They're going to probably run with a bolt gun. I prefer the bolt style look in scopes.
I think a lot of it's going to be personal
Yep.
preference, but if you want to use it for double duty as a handheld, that bolt style scope is not going to fit in your pocket like a compact thermal scope will. But it's 100% personal preference. I'm glad that they have both styles available because there are advantages to the traditional looking scope for a bolt gun. It's going to work better as far as eye relief, and some of the regular style scopes, depending on the mounts, they get in the way of the eject port or the actual bolt moving. If you're coming from a bolt gun and you're going to use a bolt gun, you know that the bolt style thermal optics are going to work for you. So it just depends, personal preference and what you use.
All right, here's another question. Should I save up or how much should I spend on my first scope?
That's a great question.
It's going to be different for everybody. Don't finance a scope, save up. Don't put a scope on a credit card. Don't put yourself in financial jeopardy trying to buy more scope than you can afford.
So you just called out 50% of them.
But currently,
Anybody's using credit
2000
cards.
yeah, $2,000, $2,500 is about the entry point. Everything below that is questionable whether you'd like it, but $2,000, $2,500, pretty much every customer we deal with likes it. They think it's a good buy. That number's been going down over the past.
Yeah,
Used to be
yeah,
5,000. Now it's
It's going down.
2,500.
It's going down big time.
yeah. There's a lot of quality scopes in the entry level market now. I would say anything 384 or 320 and over, you're going to be able to do a lot with it. I know AGM has some much less expensive scopes now. I think some 256 scopes. I haven't tried them personally, so I can't speak to how good those are. I'm sure they would work for a lot of people, but if you buy a scope like that, you got to be honest with yourself and know your personality, because if you buy something like that, you're probably going to want to upgrade almost instantly. You'll get the thermal bug. You'll be like, oh, this is amazing being able to see in the dark, and you'll be able to shoot stuff. You're going to have some trouble with ID. You got to be much more careful with ID and animals with a lower end scope. And especially if you're inexperienced, you better double check and verify what you're shooting at. But a lot of the entry level scopes these days are great. Any like 384s from AGM, Pulsar, from IRA. I didn't mention that other brand, but yeah, most entry level scopes are going to be good.
As soon as your buddy shows up with the RH50R, you're going to want to upgrade immediately.
Know yourself, know your personality, and know your budget, and just be honest with yourself, because if you got plenty of money and you know you like the best stuff, don't buy the entry level thing, because you're just going to be selling that really quickly and upgrading to something else.
Yeah.
And thermal technology is advancing and prices are coming down, so your resale value is not as good as maybe it once was. So make sure that you get something that you're going to be happy with for a long time. A lot of these scopes are going to do everything that you need them to do, so you won't need to upgrade. But if you have that personality where you have the upgrade bug, then just wait and get into a 640 or buy something a little bit nicer. I see a comment, what's wrong with the ATN Thor 4?
Say,
We'll just give you a little context. I mean, we used to carry ATN. ATN used to have some good products back in the day when they're using FLIR cores, and they had people in charge there who cared about quality, and they used to make some good scopes, but the quality has gone downhill. You just never know what you're going to get. You might get a scope that functions great, but a lot of people are going to get a scope that doesn't work. ATN has a habit of releasing scopes that haven't been properly tested and vetted, and they kind of let their customers be the beta testers for those scopes. And so if you get a lemon, then you got to rely on ATN customer service, which is spotty. I haven't had any personal experience lately, but just following generally the comments and the posts that I see in some of our Facebook groups, on a regular basis, you're going to see somebody who said, I bought an ATN and it went blue screen of death, or static screen, or had
Linen.
one problem or another, and then they're having trouble getting a hold of ATN for customer service.
We have a question here from T_Mac. Does the
Oh,
speed of the lens make a difference?
the speed of the lens matters. I think what he's talking about is like the F number. So f1.2 versus 1.4 versus f1.0. And I think IRA has that finder scope is like a f.9. So your lens speed is basically, it's the diameter of the lens versus like the focal length that's listed. So 50 millimeter f1.2 lens isn't actually 50 millimeters in diameter. You would divide 50 by 1.2, and that would give you the actual lens diameter. So that's going to have an effect on how sensitive that scope is to thermal radiation, because a bigger lens is going to gather more light. So the faster the lens, the better. You're going to have issues with anything slower than like a f1.2. One of my favorite optics is actually a f1.4, the Atlas 100. But the magnification that you get on that unit makes up for the slow lens, but you can definitely notice a difference in terms of your image quality and sensitivity versus like a Envision Halo that has a 1.2 lens or a 1.0 lens.
We got a couple guys in here that said they bought adders and bought TS19, a TS19, a TS25, and all like them. So that's some feedback for the crowd here. I got another guy that asks, what setup would you recommend if I have $3,500 to spend?
Lots of good options out there now. It used to be Bolt TL35 was the go-to answer for sure, but there's lots of options now. There's the Ricoh G. Isn't that one like $29.99?
It's $24.99 now. Yeah.
Tyler, you're going to be much more up to date on all the prices and stuff. So
You've got the AGM products. There's 3 or 4 of them in that price range. A couple adders and a couple of the rattlers. And in the iRay product line, you have the GL35R, which is a laser rangefinder 384, 35 millimeter. Again, you have the Bolt TL35 V2. There's a lot of good scopes. There's the TL25 SE, which is below that price point. It used to be that $3,500 didn't get you much. Now you have a long list. But to answer that question directly, you can't answer that question directly with just that information. It's a nuanced answer. We need to know your hunting situation. We'd have to know your shooting skill level. We need to know your hard budget. Is it $500 above that, or do you really want to spend $2,500? There's some other questions to determine a real suggestion or a specific suggestion.
Call and talk to T-Mac or send him a chat. He's the guy that can tell you, based on your specific circumstances, what your best options are. Somebody asked, what's the furthest kill recorded with the RS-75? Chris Robinson had one that was, 500 yards?
It was over 500.
I want to say there's another one. I can't remember who the guy was.
I shot a coyote at 506.
I remember that.
Yeah.
With the 243.
Yeah. His was closer to 600. There's an episode on it on his TV show on Night Crew.
Yeah, check out Night Crew. If you haven't seen Night Crew, if you haven't subscribed to their channel, definitely check them out. They make some of the best content ever. Nobody works harder, is more dedicated than getting quality, unique footage than Chris Robinson. He is always pushing the limits of what you can get in terms of footage. They got some crazy stuff on there.
Yeah, it's actually educational. You learn a lot. If you watch the first 3 seasons of Night Crew, you'll actually be a better hunter just from doing that.
Somebody asked me what's my favorite calibers. I have several 6.8s. I love 6.8. It's a really good round. 7.62 by 39 is a great hog hunting round. If you want something more that's more versatile for like coyotes and stuff, you'd probably want something different. 7.62 by 39 is excellent on hogs, and ammo is cheap and available, and we've killed thousands of hogs with it. Anthony was the one who got me on it with the PWS rifles. It's a great round as long as the ammo supply from Russia doesn't dry up anytime soon, or they supplement that ammo supply somehow, then that should be a good caliber for a long time. I'm currently running 300 Hammer, which is an excellent round. It's just a really solid round for both hogs and coyotes. I've been running that for almost 2 years now, a few times recently, just to shoot some longer stuff, but that's a heavy rifle and unnecessary for the hunting that I do. You got buff guys like Amantine who like to
disagree,
lug that stuff around.
And Tyler sling the shit out of 308.
It's a heavy rifle. That's right.
I love it.
Yeah, it's heavy and it
I love it.
does heavy work.
15 pounds all day.
308's a good round. The rounds I listed are good. I'm not the type of person to try all like the latest fad rounds. I don't understand the additional benefit of trying new stuff. I hate having to sight in my rifles more than I already do. I just stick with what works, and 6.8, 7.62 by 39 and 300 Hammer worked really good for me. I've used 300 Blackout. Didn't have good results with it, but I also didn't use 300 Blackout a whole lot. So I can't say it's a terrible round, but I would say compared to 7.62 by 39, I don't see any advantages to it other than maybe just the availability of subsonic ammo, which pretty much sucks for hunting. I mean, there are some specialty rounds that you can use as far as subsonics, but It's going to be expensive, and I don't know what the application is, like why you can't just use a supersonic round for most people. So if you have a special situation where you need to use subs, then that might be an option.
All right, we got a question. Can you go over the internal spec that directly correlates to image quality when scanning around? I don't know what spec that is.
There's your refresh rate, which is going to give you, if you have a higher refresh rate, you're going to have a smoother image. It's going to be easier to track stuff that's moving, and you're going to have less motion blur when you're panning. If you're scanning out of a window of a vehicle while you're driving along the road, you're going to be able to see easier with a scope that has a higher refresh rate. As to what gives a scope the image quality, there's so many factors that are involved, too many to really like narrow it down to anything. There are things that are very popular for people to focus on. There's kind of like the flavor of the month as far as what makes a good thermal. If you're just looking at spec sheets, like the millikelvin spec has become really popular recently. I mean, there's a lot of factors. You got to try them out. Ultimate Night Vision has a rental program, so that's the best way to really see like what a certain scope can do, and you can get in and actually try a scope for yourself without making that huge financial commitment. So renting a scope, checking out a buddy scope are probably the best ways to do it. Watching video online is helpful. Like a lot of people say, "Oh, you can't rely on video because the image quality is so much different through the scope." Maybe to a certain extent.
You get a good idea.
You get a good idea. Like some scopes really have crappy video image quality, so it doesn't do the image quality of the scope justice, but for the most part, you can tell a lot from the video.
What that is if you take the refresh rate number, so if it's 30 hertz, that's 30 images per second. If it's 60, it's 60 images per second. That's what that means. The higher the number, the more images per second in the video. Rusty Shackelford says Rich has never shot a boar behind a Whataburger at 2 a.m. and it shows.
I don't know what that's implying. I think I was the first person to go through the Whataburger drive-through and document it with a pile of pigs in the back of the truck. One, I think really far back in the day when we had six pigs going through the Whataburger drive-through after the hunt. And then we had one where we had like 20 or 15 or 20 in the back of the truck. We used to do Whataburger after pretty much every hunt, and I probably gained 30 pounds, so I don't do that anymore.
Little known fact, 30% of the bacon at Whataburgers in East Texas comes from just where they get their bacon. We worked out a deal with them.
I do remember after we went through the Whataburger drive-through, we realized that we still had those hogs, and we didn't have a good place to dump them, and we may have found someplace close to a Whataburger to dump those hogs.
Think they're ever going to get higher?
There's an iRay cord that's 90 hertz. There's stuff out there. There are things that exist. Yeah, higher than 60 for sure.
That'll be interesting. It's funny how things come along. Like I remember when back in the day, people would say you can't notice the difference between 30 hertz and 60 hertz. And people realize that that's just not true. So I think the same comments will be made about 90 hertz versus 60 hertz, although there's trade-offs with everything. The higher your refresh rate, the more quickly that scope's going to eat batteries. So there is a trade-off. But I like the technology moving forward, and I look forward to trying those out. I know like the iPhone screen, I think the iPhone screens are 120 hertz refresh rate, or I don't know if they're 90 or 120, but you definitely notice it's just smoother. It's more pleasing to the eye, and I'm sure it would help you on moving targets. I think somebody had a question about the removable batteries. One of the good advancements that's been happening with thermal scopes is thermal scopes used to be pretty much all like commercial off-the-shelf batteries, so AA's and CR123s. People used to say, that was an advantage. Like if shit hits the fan, then I'm always going to be able to find AA's, or I have a pallet of CR123s. But if you hunt a lot, that's terrible. I'm not a stingy person, but when I had batteries and people were asking me for batteries, or I was having to replace batteries, I got so mad at people because it adds up. I hate buying batteries. I hate spending money on batteries. So I'm really glad that they're rechargeable. It's kind of the best of both worlds. Now you have rechargeable batteries, but they're removable and replaceable. So you don't have like an internal battery like on the old FLIR Scouts where you would run that battery down and then have to send it back to FLIR to get it replaced and hope that they still service those things. So I think that's the best of both worlds, the removable rechargeables. I do like the ones that have the 18650s or other rechargeable lithiums that you can just purchase more, because proprietary batteries at some point reach a point where they're going to become obsolete. But the good thing is that most of these scopes also have ports for external power. So if you really were in a bind and you really happen to keep your scope for 10 years or so, if it's not completely obsolete, by then you can still power it externally with like a USB-C or something like that. That's been a big improvement in scopes these days. I had a question. Do you recommend any clip-on? Yeah, it's going to be highly dependent on your situation and your application and your preferences and needs. The iRay Micro RH25 is a clip-on. You can use that as a clip-on. It's a very versatile optic. It allows you to use it as a clip-on, like if you have a low power variable optic, but if you want to use it with like a higher magnification day optic, it's not going to be useful to you. So it just really depends on what your use case is. If you kind of want like an all-around versatile optic, something like the RH25, you're going to be able to use as a handheld. You can helmet mount it. You can use it as a dedicated weapon scope, or you can use it as a clip-on. If you want something like that, it's the perfect optic. That's been super popular. Those have been flying off the shelf since they came out, but it's not for everyone. If you want to shoot long range, like if you want to shoot coyotes at 400 yards, that's not going to be the optic for you. So it just depends.
I'd argue if your budget is 5,500, that's the one for the first optic you should buy. It's so versatile. You can do so many things with it. Use it as a binocular, use it as a handheld, use it as a weapon sight or a clip-on.
Hybrid 50 is a good one too.
I think it depends. I think if you want to hunt coyotes, you're going to want something with some magnification on it. But if you want a general purpose, versatile optic with excellent image quality, the RH25 is hard to beat.
Kim Jang says 4570 lever actions are ideal for hogs. I think he disagrees with the 6.8 or 7.62.
That's what I'm saying. It's
I'm-
expensive to shoot.
I mean, I'm sure it works, but overkill and ammo capacity, it just depends. Like if you're shooting one hog at a time or something like that, or a couple hogs at a time under a feeder, sure. Or if you just want to blow a giant hole in them and take pictures, sure. But if you're hunting like where we hunt, you're going to want that magazine capacity. You're going to want 30 rounders, 20 round minimum. I see Anthony making faces, and I'm just thinking back to when he decided to take his bolt gun and we got into a group of 100.
It was over 100
So
pigs in this field. I'm out there with a bolt gun and 5 rounds.
bolt guns are cool. Maybe I'll get one day, but it's hard to beat an AR.
Trevor Wharton says, does Amantine recommend Magpul bipods?
Into that.
Check out the podcast with Texas Predator Hunting. I'm sure he's already seen it.
Yeah.
Great discussion. Very entertaining.
Buddy D says, I happened upon Amantine by chance, and his videos got me interested in night hunting.
That's awesome. I love
I think that's
Thanks,
good.
bud.
I think that's common. I hear that all the time.
It's the
A ton of people.
That's the ultimate goal right there. It's not about sales. It's not about followers. It's growing that community, man. I didn't have that stuff when I was younger getting into this.
Yeah, pretty cool. When I first got night vision, it was amazing. I mean, it's like having a superpower. And thermal was like the same thing. It's cool stuff if you've used it. I mean, I was in sales for, I don't know, 5, 7 years, and I didn't have to sell anything to anybody. I mean, all you have to do is take a look at it to know it's something that you're going to want if you're into any of this sort of stuff. If you're into outdoor stuff, survival stuff, hunting, anything, you're going to want to get yourself a thermal and or some night vision. Anything else, guys?
Pay attention to the comm specs. There's a good comm specs popping up here and there on Ultimate Night Vision's website. That's a good way to get into some type of night vision.
And Anthony builds them, so he knows. He's seen them, so he knows if a good batch has come through. Don't message him. Just check the website.
Got some refurbs coming in too.
Message T-Mac.
So how do you message T-Mac?
info@ultimatenightvision.com, or I don't know his email off the top of my head. Is it tmac@ultimatenightvision.com?
Yep, or 800-769-0159.
T-Mac will get you squared away.
Any time of the night.
Yeah, but can we put a cell phone on here?
If you're hunting and your
answer.
scope fails, just call T-Mac. He'll take care of you.
Todd's going to regret not being here.
So,
We hope to do a bunch more of these in the future. This is just kind of a way that we can get out, interface with you guys, answer questions, be a little more helpful, because I was feeling bad. All I'm doing is just posting kill videos, and I know some people might find them entertaining, but I don't feel like I'm being helpful to people, and I got a lot of knowledge that I want to share, and so do these guys. And so we're going to do these live streams. It's just an easy way to get that information out to people, and hopefully be helpful, educate some people, and also just interface with you guys. We'll try to do it on a regular basis. I have a studio here in my home in East Texas, and we're working on the headquarters studio where Anthony and Tyler are right now, and that's coming along. That's going to be pretty legit. We'll have a whole set built up sooner rather than later. Anyway, thanks guys. Appreciate you tuning in. Appreciate you following all our stuff, and we'll get back to you soon.